U.S. President Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs on all imports entering the United States. And of course, South Africa is included in the long list of countries that now face higher U.S. tariffs. Let's now welcome Professor Tshepo Mongalo at Wits, Professor of Corporate Law. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. All right, so of course, a story that continues to dominate news globally. I mean, these new tariffs have already affected the rand here back home this morning, sending it to plummet closer to the 19 rand mark. This is the weakest level the local currency has hit since mid-January this year, we understand. As we get your reaction, Professor, perhaps let's start with your reaction to the Trump administration's assertion that South Africa charges 60% of U.S. imports. I mean, there seems to not be enough clarity in terms of how tariffs will be applied here, but of concern is how they got to the 60% mark. I mean, what's your view?
Well, I think to a large extent it appears to be something that someone has just given a number to say this is what South Africa appears to be charging us. But it looks like they were actually taking it from different export items that were taken from South Africa and going into the United States, even those that did not end up in the United States on the first export from South Africa, even though they may have gone through other countries before they went to the U.S. And all of that has been counted as part and parcel of what they are charging to the U.S. And that's why they would come to something like 60%.
Talk then about the impact and perhaps unpack it a little bit. I mean, South Africa's biggest export to the U.S. is platinum, which may be exempted from the import tax as we start to study some of these news coming in. But its second biggest export are cars. You know, I mean, how hard hit will this particular industry be? I mean, what's the likely impact there? And does this mean the duty-free tariffs that have been enjoyed through AGOA, as an example, does that mean that this is now all over?
Well, it appears so, because the executive powers that President Trump has and his administration has used it quite extensively would mean that they can be able to then even put away any multilateral agreements that have been entered into, and therefore actually undermine any bilateral or multilateral agreements that the U.S. has by actually exercising these executive powers in relation to tariffs. And it appears clearly that the main intention is to try to punish those that have something that Trump has against them, and at the same time what he thinks is actually a rip-off of the United States over the years with regard to the imposition of tariffs on that country by many other countries that he says they've been ripping off the U.S. for a long time. But I think the real reason here has got to do with the protection of the manufacturing sector of the United States. I think there is this obsession with America becoming the dominant power in terms of manufacturing, and the administration thinks that the best way to do this is by actually protecting the American businesses by shielding them away from any competition, because they will be protected, because the goods that come in there will be the ones that will be amenable to these high tariffs, and as a result there wouldn't be as many goods that will actually compete with those that are produced by the United States companies. And I think by doing that, they are actually shooting themselves in the foot, because the intention here is to try to go back to the good old days of manufacturing and make America the greatest nation in manufacturing. But those days are over. Yeah. In fact, today, the most developed economies actually rely not only on manufacturing, but on services. And to basically argue that we can go back to those days in the 60s where, a great nation would be the one that is great in manufacturing is actually trying to relive the past. Yeah. And I don't think that we are actually at that level. In fact, the U.S. has got a trade surplus in relation to services industry, although it has got trade deficit in relation to manufacturing.
And Prof, just to look at, South Africa's avenues, I mean, the presidency, of course, has responded to this. They've issued a statement just very quickly. It says, while South Africa remains committed to a mutually beneficial trade relationship with the United States, unilateral imposed and punitive tariffs are a concern and serve as a barrier to trade and shared prosperity. Does this development present an opportunity, perhaps, for South Africa, even if it's in a small way, to, in fact, diversify trade relations with maybe a bigger pool of markets and not have a reliance for one single market, at least for the next 4 years? If you can be very quick, Prof, in that response.
Most definitely. I think this is the best opportunity to look as where our goods can actually be well received. Without actually having to rely on the dominant force of the U.S. in relation to what we export there. But of course, the gap will be left by the fact that what we do in the area of motor industry, manufacturing, and what we export to the U.S. is going to suffer. But we can obviously, as a country, look at other jurisdictions where we can be able to do that quite effectively.